Hi, my name's Stefan Langella. I'm from Langella Consulting, and I've been invited by GRAPHISOFT here in the US to discuss some of the large projects in ArchiCAD in Australia that I've been involved in the last number of years. So just to let you know where I'm from, I was originally based in Brisbane, in Queensland, which is a city of about 2.5 million people these days. But currently I live and work in Sydney, which is about 5.5 million people. I've worked for a number of organisations over the years, including Woods Bagot. I've worked on the other side of the fence for GRAPHISOFT Australia for a number of years, just doing training and consulting, etc. I worked for a company called Rice Daubney, which was then taken over by HDR, which you guys would know there is a very large firm in the States. And I've also worked for another company, Atlas Industries, who are a large outsourcing company in Vietnam, who do projects in Australia, Middle East, and the UK. So I've been doing this now for about 28 years, and I always love showing this slide. It's every single box that I think I've opened over the last 28 years, including that one up in the top left-hand corner, which was ArchiCAD 3.1, which I remember running on a Mac 2X with about 2 meg of RAM and 20 meg hard drive, but things have certainly changed since then. So this is something I love hearing. You can't do that. I guess I've heard that for a number of years. When I was first on ArchiCAD and the rest of the industry was on 2D AutoCAD, they were telling us you couldn't do that. And I've heard that for a number of years on projects, and particularly, various project types and large things. So this is just, I guess, an example of some of the larger projects that have been delivered in Australia, either totally using ArchiCAD or mostly using ArchiCAD. A lot of people would probably recognise Eureka Tower up in the right-hand corner in Melbourne. It's about an 88-storey building in the centre of Melbourne. Top left-hand corner is Sunshine Coast Hospital, which was a $2 billion P3 project. Sunshine Coast, which was a 70% ArchiCAD, 30% Revit documentation project. Bottom left is a retail project in Wollongong. It's about a $200 million retail project, but it has some extraordinary design features around it. It's a West Kira project in Wollongong. And the one in the bottom left-hand corner is a project that I've been involved in most recently, functioning as a BIM consultant for the project architects. This is a project which I'll just show you some information on from their website. Up in Brisbane, it's called the Queen's Wharf Brisbane project. It's a casino, leisure, hotel, residential project. So I'll take you to, this is the website for the architects this project. They're a firm called Cottee Parker, who have been using ArchiCAD for well over 20 years. Up in Brisbane, which is where I'm from, and they've actually been going through quite a lot of expansion in the last year or two across a number of cities in Australia, and this would be their largest project by far in Brisbane, which is the Queen's Wharf Brisbane project. As I said, it's an integrated leisure resort. It's got casino, hotels, residential on it. It's about a $3 billion it's Australian dollar construction cost for this project. And I'll just jump you over to, this is the website for the actual project itself for the DBC, which is the Design Brisbane Consortium, which you can just Google this and go and have a look for yourself. But just to show you, that's a good diagram there that just shows the breakup of, you've got a hotel tower, you've got these two sort of semi-circular towers that sit underneath the sky deck, which is about 24th floor. There's another tower over here, which is hotel, and then 2 residential towers. And that all sits on obviously sits on a ground floor plane and has quite a large sort of basement underneath it, and integrates with a lot of heritage buildings there. It's right in the middle of a parliamentary precinct. It's got lots of old sandstone buildings in it and the like. So to give you an idea of the size of the project, its context and the like, I'm just going to take you to this page with the video. So you can see where this sits in a very prominent position in Brisbane, right on the river. As I said, it's along what's called George Street, which is a parliamentary precinct. It's got a university at one end, and it's right on the corner of the CBD. So it's quite a large project. As I said, Cottee Parker are the architect for this project, and they're doing all of the base building works, back of house fit out, etc. is all being done within ArchiCAD. And then integrating with, I think there's about 20 consultants, design consultants on this project at the moment. Quite a number of those guys are using Revit. So there's a lot of toing and froing with using IFC. And there's a lot of requirements from the client in terms of information and data that they want in the IFC file, and in particular place in the IFC file. So my role in this project has been to assist with the architects, particularly just with looking at the type of information that needs to be in the file, where it needs to be, and just looking at the processes by which they do that. So as I said, it's quite a large project. But as I said to the client, to Cottee Parker Architects right at the front, guys, we're on the right platform. We all know we're on the right platform. Yeah, no one's thinking about changing to something else. And they agreed. And so we've proceeded from there. So the project goes to tender shortly in the next couple of weeks. That's where the phase we're at. So I'm going to take you back into presentation. What I'm going to take you through now is just some techniques for how you deal with projects of size within ArchiCAD. And I guess they're things that I've developed over the years through experience. They've largely held true from project to project. I guess the only thing that's probably changed is ArchiCAD's just ability to take larger and larger file sizes and the like. So the first thing I like to do with any type of project that I'm working on, is to break that building down into 3 parts, and to break it down into, firstly, structure, facade, and fit out. And in terms of, levels of accuracy and the like, I always have structure as being 100% accurate. It's if you end up pouring $15,000 worth of concrete in the wrong place, you're going to have to pay for it and jackhammer it out. Whereas, you make mistakes with fit out, it may not necessarily be as costly and the like, although that's different in healthcare, as some people probably already know. So the other thing I like to do is, once we've broken that down into those 3 main areas, is then look at identifying what are the repeatable elements on the project, looking at, the core, or the cores where either fire stairs, vertical circulation's happening, looking for typical floors. You may have wet areas that are typical from floor to floor, or you might have, say, a standard rooms process, which you have in health, or there's a number of other things. And typically I say to people is to keep the entire project within a single file, and just keep going until you feel that the file is unmanageable, and then have a strategy to split. I mean, just looking at the diagram on the left, the only reason I might split a project of that size, let's say 2 towers with a podium and a basement, is that you might have different floor-to-floor heights. One tower might be commercial and the other one's residential. If that's the case, I would definitely split those, because you just end up having this problem in terms of managing these different floor-to-floor heights between them. So it's easier to maybe split one tower out and leave the second tower with the basement works in there, and then just join them together on the layout book. So what I'm going to have a look at is a process, one of the processes I'm quite familiar with, which is looking at creating both room layouts. I think some of you guys refer to this more as like enlarged plans, but your 1 to 50 type of plans for room types, and then how you integrate that across the model and back into your general arrangement. I'm going to use health as an example, but you could do the same, you use the same technique for a unit type if you were doing residential or hotels, or, you know, as I was saying before, or, you know, the core buildings, typical floors, etc. But in this case, what we're looking to do is we're looking to take a room, and it might be a room that's repeated a number of times within a hospital. The first thing you want to do is you want to be able to document that room. So what I would do is model that room and then add the annotation, add the walls that you require, and then you can document it from there with your elevations, etc. But then what I would want to do from that model is also for the general arrangement coordination is publish a mod file out from there. Now, again, what I'd be looking at doing is setting up in the file, I would have a room per story. To do this, it's a much easier way to do it. Once upon a time, I might have had a separate file with these rooms in it and a separate file with the master building. These days, what I tend to do is set up a whole bunch of stories underneath 0. In Australia, we'd call it the Australian height datum. I'm not sure what we call it in the US. But I'd set up a series of stories underneath and put a single room or single unit on each story. One of the projects I've got at the moment, I think I've got about 180 stories underneath a hospital. I don't think there's necessarily any that we're going to hit there anytime soon. So as I said, what I would do from that story is publish out a mod file, and then you'd insert it in the model, and then you can update that over time. Now, the reason I would do that, publish that mod file, is it only takes out the elements that I need. So those walls and annotation that I needed for the 1 to 50 documentation, I may not necessarily want that because I want the unique walls that are in the master building. So I only publish out what I want. Mod file's tiny, and it really acts as a filter of only bringing what I want into the main file. And then from there, of course, I create my 1 to 100, 1 to 200 documentation from there. I've used this process on that $2 billion hospital. We had about 6,500, 7,000 rooms across there, and a number of them were repeatable. And it worked great for a project of that scale. We had a rule on that project. If there's more than one, you apply this process, because what you're always looking for in any software that you're trying to apply to your business, you're always looking for a single action that will give you multiple consequences. You know, because we're a service-based industry, and we're always looking to multiply our effort within any within given time. So, I'm going to talk about IFC and Open BIM. I guess I've had a fair amount of experience around this over the years with multiple projects and doing coordination, etc. So, what I first want to say I don't want to get too technical with IFC, but I want to make it clear. IFC is a container. It's an open file format specification to describe building and construction industry data. That's what it is. And if it isn't in that description, then it doesn't do that. So there's nothing necessarily in there that says anything about containing layout information or containing annotation for drawings, etc. Okay? So it's great for 3D geometry. It's great for data, contains all those things quite well and very robustly, but it's not good for 2D. Excuse me, there's been improvements that have been made over the years, both you know, on the Revit platform and on ArchiCAD, etc. But generally, the file description, that's not what its job is to take across 2D data. I'll give you an example here. This was from a project I was actually working on a couple of weeks ago. We kept going up to story 2, and it took about 30 seconds for the screen to regenerate in ArchiCAD. And we were trying to figure out what's going on. Well, the first thing I know from many years of experience is ArchiCAD does not like lines. It does not like having thousands and thousands of lines to deal with. And so what I discovered was at the back of the building, and this was an IFC file that we'd got from our client of an existing facility. There was a bank of louvers at the back of the building at level 2, and it had, you know, a whole bunch of banks of louvers, and each individual louver blade was modelled there. I took one of those louver blades as an object, and you can see it there on the left, and then in the middle, what I did was I exploded it. And suddenly I realised that each symbol had about 4,000 lines. So each louver bank, you know, you can do the math. Suddenly I realised, you know, it was trying to regenerate hundreds of thousands of lines every time we went to that story. So it was a fairly simple process to I guess, change that, to deal with that. But that was there, again, I guess, an example of where stuff was coming through from IFC that really wasn't, in terms of the 2D, it wasn't really fit for purpose, and we had to do some work on that. So you'll get these objections whenever you're trying to collaborate with other people who are working on other platforms. Generally, I find those people generally are a little bit lazy and are not used to having to collaborate or think outside of their own file formats, etc. So you get objections like this, that, oh, IFC, it's flaky, which I've only ever really in Australia heard from Autodesk resellers, but occasionally I've heard it from engineers as well. And also, you know, this question about data loss. And I always ask the question back, I said, well, you explain to me, what do you mean by data loss? And give me an example of where you've seen data loss. I had one guy actually say, well, it just feels like I'm losing something. I'm like, well, we're professionals and we're working on $1 million projects here, so let's get down to what are we actually losing. There was only one time that I have seen data loss, and that was coming out of Revit MEP, back when the platforms were separated. And there was a problem in the file, in the text file that was supplied with the software, and it was about cable trays. And in the text file that tells you what Revit entity turns into what IFC entity, there was they used the wrong terms for the IFC entity. So what happened was it just didn't convert them. There was no error message. There was nothing like that. It just simply didn't convert them. So I was receiving IFC files from my engineer and just had a go at him about, where's your electrical design? He said, no, I've done it. Couldn't work it out. And of course, you know, oh, it's all IFC's fault, you know. So I actually took his file, opened it in Revit. I don't know how to use Revit, but I know how to hunt and click. So I eventually figured out what the actual problem was with a bit of Googling for IFC terms, and figured out that there was a problem with that version of Revit that had come out a number of years ago now. So I think an important thing to remember with IFC, you know, blaming IFC for just about any issue is like walking into your child's bedroom and blaming the wardrobe for the clothes being on the floor or in the wrong place. You know, IFC is a container, you know, and you know, we build models in ArchiCAD and they get translated into IFC in the best way they can, and then they get opened in another platform like Revit and get translated into Revit elements in the best way they can. You know, and in some cases, certain things will translate in certain ways because the software can either deal with it or can't deal with it. So there are certain things that might be as a beam element within Revit, but when they come into ArchiCAD, because the beam tool doesn't deal with that kind of geometry, it turns into an object. But as I said, I've been using IFC for file transfer for many, many years. Been using it for coordination on small, medium, large projects. Typically, nothing's ever going to happen if you just sit in your office and someone rings you up and says there's a problem, and if you don't actually leave your office and go and have a look at what their problem is, it's never going to get solved. So consultant coordination, as I was talking about before, I've used IFC quite a lot for that. And we use a product here in Australia, which I know doesn't get used a lot over there, called Celebri. which is very similar it's similar in a number of ways to Navisworks. And Navisworks gets used here in Australia a lot, particularly on that project I was looking at before, the Queen's Wharf project. We're using Navisworks extensively on that, but we're also using Celebri for the things that Navisworks can't do. So Navisworks is Celebri is very good at doing model comparisons, showing you, taking a model from a month ago and to a model, to a recently issued one, and showing you what's been modified, what's been deleted, and what the new elements are. It's very good at clash detection, as is Navisworks, but it's also very good at proximity detection. It's also very good at deficiency detection as well. And one of the things I particularly like about it is just the way that you can actually overview problems within your model and overview issues. I think one of the things that a lot of people have used Navisworks, they become very aware of. Navis will pick up every single clash and will report every single clash, but there's quite an effort. If you want to group those clashes into an issue, then it's not necessarily that easy. Celebri has been very good at it, and this is an example here of the spaces in a retail project, and any of the services that are falling into those spaces, they shouldn't really be there, show up, visually. And it's very easy in a meeting just to walk around that building and take shots within, create a presentation and a report within Celebri showing where those things are. So it's really good at being able to overview problems, so you can have them as a discussion point and then create issues there from them. So, a lot of, I do love these people who say that services engineers quite often, you say, are you guys actually working in 3D? Yeah, we're working in 3D. I said, well, your model doesn't show it. And they're like, no, we're working in 3D. And, well, here's a couple of examples. The one on the right, I was saying to them, why, when I've got a raked ceiling in this space, have you given me a design for a flat ceiling? And it's one of the things people have been using ArchiCAD for one time forget, particularly people on Revit, can't just throw a marquee down around an area and go to the 3D window and walk around it in 3D and walk around it in perspective and look at it. That's not how Revit works. And what I find is a lot of engineers are typically still working in plan. And not all of them don't check it in 3D, but occasionally you do get them. And so, you get these sort of examples of things that happen here. So again, sometimes I think it's really worthwhile getting alongside of your engineers and seeing exactly how they do sort of work. So this, I think, is one of the key questions that you need to ask yourself when you're just creating documentation, when you're coordinating with your consultants and the like. I hear people say, "Oh, I just want to have a single model where everybody's working together, and why can't everybody work together?" And I'm like, what are you actually trying to achieve by that? What are you actually trying to get to? And is that realistic in the contractual framework? So, I challenge people, I guess, in terms of what we're doing with documentation. We have a 3D model, and quite often all we do is create traditional documentation from it. And here's a good example of a section through what is actually quite a complex building, but it's a flat section. It does the job, it shows the set out, etc. But it doesn't really convey necessarily what the relationship are between elements. So it's quite easy within a program like ArchiCAD just to add a series of perspectives with this. Now, I remember someone looking at this and going, why would you do that? The builder doesn't pay for those perspectives. Why are you putting these on the drawing? Which the answer is, well, if if you're working within any sort of BIM platform, well, the 3D information is already there. To put those on the drawing really is hardly any extra effort. But what it does is it shows the builder far more information. It goes a long way to reducing risk on site. But it's also, because a lot of people aren't necessarily doing this, you're differentiating your documentation in front of the builder or in front of the client. So, it becomes a point of difference. People see your documentation and go, oh, that's those guys. They always do the 3D. You know? I've had a lot of positive feedback from a number of firms that I've worked with over the years where we've done this sort of thing. The other thing to, look at using in ArchiCAD as well, excuse me, in this area is to use schedules and to use the graphic schedules. You can't do this very easily in Revit, if at all. You can do kind of a facsimile of this, but to do door schedules or equipment schedules and to use the graphics with those is quite easy to do within ArchiCAD. And it's quite a time-saving kind of thing if you can, make that work for you. One of the things I've looked at doing over the years, door schedules and window schedules are the fairly obvious ones that everybody wants to do. Everybody does theirs differently, but that's fine. But one of the things I've looked at, particularly on large hospitals, is looking at joinery and looking at the way that you would document joinery. So I kind of figured if you placed all your joinery within the model, why would I have to do anything else except try and extract information at different scales? So typically we would do two other types of drawings for a joinery package. We would do this 1 to 50 drawing that showed typically what the size and the arrangement of the various joinery units would be, and we would also do 1 to 10 or 1 to 20 strategy drawings. Well, I kind of figured if I could, with GDL, maybe I could use GDL to do both and the like. So what we did on a lot of the hospital projects I've worked on, and I'm working with a small firm at the moment to help them achieve winning larger work, is to do exactly this in the area of joinery. Is that all the 1 to 50 drawings now are a graphic schedule that just come directly from the model. So the like for that project, that, there's only 4 hours probably spent per drawing just working out on title blocks, whereas the rest of the content is automatically generated. And strategy drawings created by just taking one of those objects, dropping it in a worksheet at 1 to 10. You've scripted in the background with GDL, but it in fact will document itself and give you a drawing similar to what's shown there. So what I would, encourage you to do in whatever your practice is, and whatever sectors that you're working in, is to think big. As I said, I've been working on ArchiCAD for a number of years. I think my first big hospital project I started working on in ArchiCAD was in about 1998. And one of the things I've found over the years as we've sort of pushed the software and challenged the software is that quite often there's been some programmer somewhere in Europe, probably in Hungary, that's actually thought about what I'm going to do before I've actually done it. And have been quite often surprised and delighted at what we've been able to do and what we've been able to achieve with ArchiCAD on a whole range of projects. But I hope this has given you some inspiration and some ideas just based on some of the things that we've been doing down here in Australia for a number of years. So I guess I'd like to thank you for your time, and we'll hand it over to any questions now. If anyone's got any questions from the webinar, I think we've got a few that have come in.
Yes, go post some questions into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, perhaps, so go ahead and take advantage. Now, the one thing I noticed was you kind of cut through the BS, really, to get to the heart problem. That seems to be the common theme. So when you visit firms, are you finding that you're doing that repeatedly, or did they finally start catching on that, once you've shown them a few techniques, they're starting to adopt these themselves?
Is that we're architects and we're delivering buildings, and we're, affecting human beings in the way that they work. And there are so many bigger issues than technology, you know what I mean? And I work in a fairly competitive market in Sydney, and, the BIM managers all tend to get a little bit bolshy and a bit, about their platforms and stuff. But I think, again, the refreshing thing and the feedback I've had from people is that, very quickly they realise I'm not there to defend the technology, because I do know that ArchiCAD is much better. But, it's like, I understand an architect's going to deliver a project, right, with a thumbnail dipped in tar. If that's all they've got, they're going to do it. right? So that's what we do, because it's about the building, it's about the project, and it's about the people that it's going to affect. And I think that's what's more important. And even when, you know, I've hit really hard-headed contractors who are just, you know, who will tell you your boss and say, your platform's outmoded, it'll be gone in 4 to 5 years. You know, they'll actually say that to their face. You know, it's just like, look, you know, I don't care. It's about the building. Can we just focus on that? Can we focus on solutions? You know, can we not get into it's Apple versus PC? You know, it's my football team versus your football team. We left that behind in school, sort of. So, yeah.
All right. Very good. And we have a question here. How many ArchiCAD files teamwork projects do you have in the Queen's Wharf project, or describe in general?
Oh, look, I mean, the thing is with that, I'm trying to remember exactly how many files I have. You know, it's an interesting one, because when you work on a project of that size, and there is a BIM consultant on that project who works for the consortium, a company called PDC. It's got some really great guys on that team. You know, they're looking at a model breakup strategy, and how you would do it. And the interesting thing was, you know, we're sort of looking at that, and they were sort of presenting, well, this is how we think we're going to do it, and this is what the consultants are going to do. So, you know, they're looking at something like that. They're looking at about like 20 or 25 different models. And we're going, yeah, that's, well, tell us how you, and they were sort of trying to inform the way that we worked internally. We went, no, we can actually do this, you know, in you know, looking at something like that, you probably do it, and you might do 5 models. If you look at that image and you go, all right, say if you did like a podium, and then you looked at the towers and the floor to floors in there, so you might do a podium, towers, you might do 4 or 5 models in there. But when you're actually issuing then the IFCs, you're breaking it down so that it's working with the other guys. And I know that was on the project, that was one of the things we said, and we said, look, if you want to break it down to floor, we'll issue floor-to-floor IFC files, but that's not going to affect the way that we actually work in ArchiCAD. We're going to work as efficiently as possible. You know, and I think one of the things that people don't understand, you know, is that the less models that you have, the less attribute management and model management overhead that you have. The beauty of ArchiCAD too is with the libraries and and all your objects, you work off a centralized library. When you're in the land of Revit, they're not. It would be like working on 25 files, and each file has an embedded library. So if you want to update a library part, you have to copy it across every one. Yeah. So again, you know, with ArchiCAD, when you look at that, and that's what I was saying before, you just look at the building, you look at the typology, and I think you keep it as big as you possibly can. But then you have in the back of your mind, you have a strategy, right? Well, if we need to break this down, how would I break it down, right? But you just keep going forward until you think, well, it is actually becoming unwieldy. We're going to need to split this. So, you know, like, but I would say your first sort of split that you would do is you would take the layout books out. In an ArchiCAD file, layout books take about 75% of the file size, in my experience. So, you know, you take the layout books out and use PMKs. And any project of any size, that's the strategy I've used. And I know some people are probably just choking right now because I mentioned PMKs, but it's actually a really efficient way. It's quicker to update, and it gives you more control, and you need more control on a larger project, and the like. So, yeah, most definitely I would work that way. So.
Very good. And someone just along the same line, they're asking about your slide about mod files. Like you mentioned that primarily you want to keep things in one file, but there are occasions.
Certainly when you've got the repeatable elements. So, you know, and I'm sort of describing what is the standard room process. So like on a hospital, you have a certain amount of rooms that you would term as unique, and then you have a certain bunch that are repeatable, or what we call standard. So, you know, you might have, you know, a typical inpatient bed scenario. You might have 76 of those on the project. You really only want to document that once. And then what you might find out is over time, well, of those 76, 72 of them are standard. There's a couple that need to change because there's columns and stuff like that. So you might actually break those hot links at some point in time in the main file. But you know what you're always looking for software to do, right? And this is the thing. In architecture, right, we don't make stuff. Right? We're not manufacturers. We don't deal with products. What we do is we provide services. So we're a service organization, so it's about time. So what we are always looking for in our business in terms of technology, what we should be looking for is what's going to multiply our effort. What's the multiplier? Salespeople talk about multiplier all the time, right? But in the service industry, we're looking for things that will multiply our effort, you know, so that we do something, so that we do things where we have single points of change with multiple consequences, which is effectively, at its very base, that's what BIM does, is that it provides a whole bunch of single points of change with multiple outcomes. So you change something on a floor plan, turns up in section, elevation, blah, right? That's what makes us more efficient. So whatever you're doing, and in terms of structuring your ArchiCAD file, you're always looking for what's the multiplier. Is it hot link modules? Is that going to help me in this? Is it GDL? Am I labeling everything? Am I using auto text? Those sorts of things. That's really what should be guiding you, you know, as to strategy.
Very good. Well, I think we've reached our time here. I'm sure we could talk all day, but
love to.
Great. Do you have any final words you might want to share?
No. Oh, look. You know what? It's sometimes it's difficult, and you feel like you're the only person. Particularly, you know, I like to explain to people from GRAPHISOFT, particularly salespeople. You know, as a client, often you just feel like you're ring fenced by Revit users every day, you know, and you often feel like you're on your own and why I'm doing this. But, you know, it's you choose the platform because it works for your business. You know, you don't choose a platform because, you know, I've talked to architects that have chosen a platform because their engineers on it. I'm like, really? Like what benefit did that bring to your business? You know, what ultimate benefit? You know, you've got to get back to this question about what is it that you actually really want to do? You know, what are you trying to do? You know, and look, as I said, from ArchiCAD, I've done massive projects with it. And I've seen, just lots of great results, lots of great profitability. So
I have one more question.
Yes.
If people want to contact you, they have questions,
how
are you reachable? How do we find you? What if we need help?
I'm hiding. No. Once I'm finished this, I'm hiding, man. No, LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Okay.
Is just go looking for me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to, and you know, because I've sort of been off. I used to be a LinkedIn monster, and I've sort of been off it for the last 18 months, but I'm back on it again, and stuff. So, and I'll usually post stuff up there as well that might be relevant, whatever. But
awesome, perfect. And if you did have questions we didn't get to, we'll certainly pass them on, and we'll answer them in chat, or we'll send you an email. Thank you so much for joining us, and please check out By Design. So if you go to graphisoft.com/by design, you can find some more inspiring content, and we hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you with the next one. Thanks.
Cool.